I have with me today a retired chief of police and a current city council member that I really wanted you to meet for a number of reasons. This is a guy who dedicated his whole working life to his hometown, but he didn't stop there. And one of the things that he's been involved in is writing and publishing a book that talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly of being a law enforcement officer. Chief, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me this morning.
So talk about your career, how you decided to get into police work and how you rose to the top.
Well, I never wanted to get in police work when I was younger. I kind of grew up, poor here in Middletown, which is a lot of us here. And I went to school and college to be a math teacher, a basketball coach, and that was my goal. And then just after my junior year, I decided to take the police test, and there's about 350 of us took it, and they hired 5 of us. So that kind of set the tone. And my dad always told me, you go to college to get a good job. And so I was offered a good job. And so I left and did that and went into police work and did everything from patrol to, detectives to narcotics, then into supervision. I became the chief when I was about 46 years old. Did that about 5.5 years, and I retired 2 years ago.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, what was the impetus for writing the book?
Just to humanize the profession. This was a journal that I kept over 30 years. Started writing in the academy, and at the advice of an academy commander who was ready to retire. And he had said, I wish I had always kept a diary, and that's what he called it, a diary. And it just stuck with me. So every experience I had, whether I saw it, heard it, felt it, I wrote about over years. And when I started writing at first, I was writing for fun. But by the time I became the chief, I was more writing for therapy. And it was just a release and outlet for me to write what I experienced, and didn't hold back on it. Beat myself a lot up that, but real critical of administrations that don't support their officers. And that's why I went out there. And so I had some friends in the media who encouraged me to release it, and I did. And so we're just shocked it's done so well nationally. I mean, never thought that.
Well, and that's the thing. The book is called Blue View. And when you go online and read the reviews of the book, people are really passionate about it and about the way that you do humanize the badge, but you don't sugarcoat the things that police officers deal with, including sometimes a lack of leadership.
Yeah, lack of leadership is the number one problem in American policing. Too many people rise to the top with agendas to political career, whatever it might be. And, that's, I'm in a political career now, being on city council. But, one thing I've been very vocal about, if anybody reads it, is you have to back your people. That's why nobody wants to be a policeman these days. That's why recruiting and academies are so down in numbers, and it starts at the top. And we have to make people want to do this, and we have to support them because it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. I've often said, it's the tagline in the book also, the hardest thing about policing is you have to solve everybody else's problems when you can't solve your own. And administrators sometimes fail to see that.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing that we talk so much about in police work, is that we have to know a lot about so many things. And
Yes.
One of the things that you dealt with in Ohio was the drug crisis, right? Like me, you worked in narcotics and then you dealt with it as the chief. How has drug enforcement and prevention changed since you were a young cop in narcotics to now as a retired chief and a city councilman?
It's changed because back in the day, you just worried about your own turf. You didn't bring in task forces and the DEA or Homeland Security. But now, with how it is with across the nation and coming up through, Mexico and the cartel, we dealt with many things just here in Middletown, a city of 50,000 people that came from, we worked with the FBI and the federal government on drugs coming up from Mexico to San Diego. We were involved in indictments. So that sharing of information over time and us doing that with federal agencies has changed. When I was a younger officer, it was just about us protecting our city. Those days are over. It takes everybody to get involved in. And to do that, you have to have total, faith in the other agencies to do that. It's changed so much.
And your officers have to be incredibly skilled at, not just the enforcement end, but things like, writing a good search warrant, writing a great report, utilizing electronic surveillance, all of those things that, I think a lot of people would look at mid to small town law enforcement and think, oh, those guys are they're making traffic stops and finding lost dogs. That's not the case, is it?
No, that's not the case at all. Back when I was a street cop, guys would stand on the corners and people would wave them down. They'd sell dope, right? Well, those days are over with cell phones. Nobody stands on the corners anymore around here and sell. It's all cell phones. So you don't have that luxury of just seeing the dealers on the corners. Those things have changed. So you have to do the search warrants for the phone records and things like that. And courts are funny about giving you those court orders to do that. They want to make sure everything's squared away. So it's just changed so much. I couldn't imagine starting a career in law enforcement right now, because what they're getting ready to get into is unlike anything we had to deal with when I was younger.
Yeah, boy, I sure agree with that. So how long were you a police officer?
30 years.
So in those 30 years, what have you seen concerning police officer mental health? Because I know that's kind of one of the themes of your book is, again, most people will see, a little bit of trauma and tragedy in their lifetime. Most cops see a lifetime of trauma and tragedy in those first couple of years on the job. And that takes a toll on us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And one thing is police, we are very type A people, and we want to be in control. We are in control a lot of times. So it's hard to go get help when you need it. When I was a younger officer, nobody ever talked about getting help. Now I see people all over the country encouraging it, because when I say get help, I just mean find somebody to talk to and release. Don't take the job home with you. It's the biggest mistake most officers make, including myself. When you take it home, you take it out on your family. You're angry all the time because you're seeing the worst of society a lot of times. Find a minister, find a counselor, find somebody. Most departments will do EAP, employee assistance program, for free. And so I always encourage people to have somebody to talk to. And my talking to was writing. Writing really helped me release things that I couldn't talk about. And so that's what it's on this book. But find whatever outlet you can and don't bring it home with you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, we have entered into probably the worst period of time for American law enforcement than you and I have probably seen in our lifetimes, where, law enforcement is just constantly, vilified. And one of the ways that some politicians are dealing with that is to take money out of our budgets, right? Defund the police. Yeah. And they do it very publicly. Some jurisdictions are taking police officers out of the schools. They're taking away specialty units and things like that. Yeah. How does all that affect law enforcement from your perspective?
Affects it greatly. And it starts with the politicians. I mean, these same people make these laws and then get mad when the police enforce these laws. I've said that for years, and there's nothing worse than that. And that's what happens with policing. It's become politicized to the point where politicians and the media are going to do whatever they can and cater to the people that cry the loudest, even if those people are wrong. And that's what they do. So what it's done to policing is you have people now who just don't want to get into the profession. We go to these colleges, these high schools, and recruit, and they're like, there's no way I'm getting in that profession. I used to want to do that, but if I do one thing wrong, it's going to be on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter within 5 minutes. And they don't want to deal with that. And I personally had several officers that came in that we had just hired within 6 months said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that. And it's not because they're cowards or not, it's just because the constant scrutiny, and they want to take away our training money. That's something people forget. Training is more important in policing than anything. And they take this money away and they defund through training and other methods, and then get mad when you don't know what you're doing or you don't have certifications that you need. So that's just what the world is right now, unfortunately. But the whole defunding is a joke, because look at all these cities that have defunded and now they're paying for it, and they're having homicide rates go through the roof. And that's a fact. That's, it's easy to research.
Right. And we're seeing this explosion in homicide, from 30% to up to 90% increase in certain areas. We're also seeing the retail theft gangs and just a complete lack of prosecution of what they used to call quality of life crimes, but now we're, when you're doing armed robberies and stealing tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise, doing drive-by shootings, this and that, and yet we see such a limited prosecution in certain areas. That's incredibly frustrating to the cops, isn't it? Who, like you said, don't make the law, but they want us to enforce the law and to stop crime. How do we change that in America?
I think it starts with, and we say it all the time, it may not happen. Police chiefs have to stand up. They have to stand up and say, this is unacceptable. And you see some doing it, and that's incredible that they're doing that. Most don't want to lose their jobs, and in a lot of the bigger cities, those have become political positions. In the smaller cities, not so much. So they can probably get away with it. Chiefs have to stand up and say, it's enough. And they have to be able to do that without fear of losing their jobs. But even if they do, at some point, you have to stand up for what's right, not what's popular. And that's not been going on lately. And that's a problem.
Absolutely. Now, most police leaders are not fans of dealing with the media. What did you do as a chief, and what do you recommend other chiefs do to have a better relationship with the media?
We had an open door policy with the media. I was never, ever, except for one news station that just was hell bent on making police look bad, but they knew they could come to us anytime. We didn't withhold information. We gave them what they asked for within reason, as long as it wasn't under investigation. But we would have like coffee, donuts for the media when they come in. And you would be amazed when you build those relationships, how they take care of you. And they're still going to report their stories, but they're going to give you a heads up. And they're going to let you know, hey, this is coming, we're doing this. It makes all the difference in the world. The other thing also is I made it clear, if they wanted to talk to an officer who was at a scene of something, pretty cool, I allowed access to that. Most chiefs won't do that. We might have our PIO in there with them when they're talking, but we allowed access to our people. And I think that went a long way here in the Cincinnati area to do that. So that's what we dealt with, was Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio media the most. So it would just go a long way. Just sometimes let them have that. I found out if you were no comment all the time, they're going to write what they want, and they're going to make their own story if you just say no comment. So I never did that.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Chief, what can we do better? We've had, again, 2 years of vilifying the police, but law enforcement officers make mistakes. What do you think that we can do better to engage our communities, to help our communities trust us when we're out doing our jobs?
Just be as transparent as possible. If somebody wants to file a complaint on an officer, always tell them you have that right to file the complaint. You can come talk to anybody in here. And one thing that we did that I think really made a difference is we had open community forums all over the city for years. So one month we do it at a coffee shop. Next month we do it at a church. And you let people come ask the hard questions. And I didn't just go. I would take sergeants, detectives, dispatchers, corrections officers, and we'd go, there's a group, and we'd say, ask away, ask whatever you want. And we would sit there and answer. Some of them were really hard, but that gained us so much trust in Middletown that I think it went a long way. But you're never going to make everybody happy in this job. You can sit and be as transparent as possible. There's always going to be 5 or 10% that nothing you say is going to matter to them. You have to understand you're going to have that and focus on the 90% that do listen.
So I want to get back to the book a little bit because I am so fascinated by that. What were the most difficult chapters to write when and I know you had your diaries, but when you were really putting it together, getting it ready for the publisher, what was difficult?
That's a great question. Clarence Page with the Chicago Tribune, he's from this area and he got a hold of it. And the race issues, Clarence is a Black journalist who's phenomenal. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's interviewed presidents, but we talked about that, the race issues, because I was very candid about that. I was very open about sometimes, I can see across the country where people would think that you look at the George Floyd situation or things like that. But police officers are so stereotyped when it comes to racist. Like my Black officers, who are some of the best officers in the city, they're called racist here. So you can't win. So when I was writing the book, about that. I'll talk about the racial issues. Those are the hardest parts because I'm very candid and open about it. Also, the chief years when we would have, homicides of children, or we would have overdoses of parents who left children there. Those were always hard to write about. And when we did the audiobook on Audible and iTunes, when I was reading them over again, because it's been years, your voice kind of cracks times reading some of these stories, and it's really hard to get through them. But it's good it's out there, and I can tell you that the whole book was hard to write, but there were certain stories that stick out in my mind the most.
What was the most fun about writing the book, and what were the most fun stories you had?
The most fun, when I went to Washington, D.C., I was a guest of Congress to the State of the Union at the Capitol, which was incredible. That was fun to write about. And then the other thing, just being in a patrol car with officers. There's a lot of funny stuff in there that I'm sure cops can relate to. And I always say, cops aren't impressed by other cops. This book will appeal more to people who've never done the job, because I guarantee you half the cops across the nation have read this or will read it and say, yeah, I've done that. So just the fun stuff in a car that, we try not to embarrass anybody. I've had nothing but positive response from guys I worked with for years in a car or in narcotics. And so it went really well. But it's just that my drug year is incredible, working in the drug unit. That was awesome. That was awesome. So, hopefully it's people enjoy it when they read it.
That's fantastic. Now I want to, because you kind of glossed over it, but I want people to know that you were invited to Washington, D.C. I want you to talk about that experience.
Yeah, I was invited to the presidential State of the Union, and got to go with Congressman Warden Davidson. And he was just really excited about the work we did in MidTown with the community, reducing the opioid problem. And so I was in Vegas at the time. So I flew out to Washington on a red eye, and I got to go to the Library of Congress with, Supreme Court and, Republicans and Democrats. And I sat in there, and I was literally with the most powerful people in the world in that room, and it was surreal. And I'm thinking, man, I'm just some hillbilly from Middletown, Ohio. How did I get here? So, but it was one of the most incredible things just to be in the room with such people that you're just like, man, this is crazy. I'm 100 feet from President Trump and Mike Pence and the Supreme Court. And even some of the Democratic senators in Congress were ultra nice to me. They asked what I did. I told them. They just asked a lot of questions. They were friendly. So it's just a whole different environment than what I've seen on TV. So that was phenomenal for me. That was in 2019.
That's awesome. And your city has been, we talked about narcotics, but yeah. I want to talk specifically about the opioid problem that we still have in the United States. I mean, it's horrific. It kills more people than almost anything else in this country, and yet you still don't hear about it enough, and we still don't really have a handle on it. What are your thoughts about how the United States is going to get a handle on this opioid problem that we have?
It starts with the federal government. We can do all the state and local programs we want. It's not flowing in from the state and local areas. It's flowing in from other countries. The federal government, they have to have a desire and a priority to stop this. And we talk so much about wall, and we talk so much about borders. It comes in from everywhere. But until the federal government takes it serious and says, we want to stop it, it's not going to get stopped. I know it's not probably the answer you were looking for, but state and local, we're limited what we can do. If it's coming in so fast, we have to stop it at the borders. We have to. And when people say, we don't need this, we don't need that, but then they complain, well, look at all the drugs in the city. Well, it doesn't come from Middletown, Ohio. It doesn't come from Dayton. We all know where it's coming from. The only one who can stop that is the federal government. It's their call.
Right. And I know it is very frustrating for state and local law enforcement, because, we can maybe stop it a little bit at our borders, but, our borders of our states or our cities. But I live near the southern border, and our officers down here, police officers, state troopers, and border patrol agents are making these massive fentanyl arrests, just massive. But for every one of those massive arrests, there's probably 40 more shipments that get through and end up where? In communities like yours, right?
Yeah. Well, I likened it one time. If you live by a river and your house and the river floods and your house has water in it every day, do you just keep cleaning up the water, or you find a way to stop the river flow?
So Chief, you had this fantastic 30-year career. You ended up at the very top. You retired just a couple years ago, but then you decided, oh, what the heck? I'll throw my hat in the ring politically. Talk about that decision.
My decision to do that was based on the community just asking me to. We had such support here in Middletown, everywhere. It was just amazing. And police and fire has been cut from Middletown unbelievably. When I got hired in 1990, we had 95 officers. Right now we have 70. We're short 25 officers from the 90s. We have double the crime. We've annexed a lot of area. Public safety is just not a priority here.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're going to make public safety a priority. Chief, where can people find the book, and where can they find you on social media?
The book is on, it's this right here. It's called The Blue View, and it's on Amazon right now. You can go on there. It's got great reviews. It's a 5-star rating. I've had some really cool people read it across America. But you can go there. It's on Audible, on Amazon, or iTunes, on Apple. I'm all over. If you just Google my name, Rodney Muterspaw, I'm on Facebook. We have a pretty good following there. We just try to get the word out. And on Twitter, I think it's Chief Muterspaw. It's my Twitter from them. But we just try to get the word out that if you want to read this book, I think if you're a police officer, you'll appreciate it. If you're not a police officer, you'll come to appreciate more. Real quick, one thing I love about it is academies across the country are buying it and having recruits read it, which we're so excited about that. We never thought that would happen. So hopefully that's something that other schools will do, and we just appreciate the support.
Chief, thanks for spending time with us today. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Sam, put the gun down! Put the gun down!
Last year, law enforcement officers were involved in hundreds of thousands of use of force incidents. A use of force incident is when an officer must use nonverbal tactics to gain control of a dangerous situation.
Put the knife on the ground.
In many cases, officers have no choice but to use force when a suspect doesn't comply with a lawful order.
Use of force is always ugly. No one likes it, especially police officers.
Together, we can help de-escalate these dangerous encounters. Help police officers by complying with their lawful orders. Don't attack, attempt to disarm, or flee from an officer.
Use of force is an officer's last option. Most incidents can be avoided by not resisting arrest.
If you feel you've been wrongfully detained by a police officer, then seek a legal solution after the encounter has been resolved.
Let's keep everyone safe. Comply now and complain later.